Hello everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar, which will show you how to implement risk-based thinking according to ISO 9001-2015. My name is Pereira da Cruz, and I'm an author at 𝗪𝗲𝗴𝗲. I do quite a lot of ISO 9001 consulting and training, but I also audit as a lead auditor. So today I'm going to share with you my thoughts about risk-based thinking. My presentation will last approximately 40 minutes, after which we'll do the 20-minute Q&A session. So if you would like to ask a question, you don't have to wait for the Q&A session to begin, okay? You can ask it during my presentation by clicking the Q&A icon and writing your question. Of course, in the Q&A session, I'll also answer all of your remaining questions. If you click on the chat icon, you can download right away a PDF file with the handout of this presentation and check the links to articles that will be mentioned during the presentation. Okay, so let's move. Okay, so why is this topic of risk relevant? Well, because ISO 9001-2015 requires organizations to manage risk that could affect product and service quality, customer satisfaction, and business continuity. Okay, so what is this webinar all about? Well, it explains how to apply risk-based thinking in line with ISO 9001, using practical steps to determine, evaluate, and mitigate risks in processes, products, and services. Okay. And finally, to whom is this webinar dedicated? Well, to quality managers, internal auditors, consultants, and professionals responsible for implementing or maintaining an ISO 9001 quality management system. Okay, so let's go to the agenda. So today we'll talk about risk definition, then about the risk-based thinking process and where risk appears in ISO 9001. Then we will give some examples of risk-based thinking. So in terms of context, intended outcomes, products and services, and processes. Then we'll speak about normally an hot topic regarding risk, documenting and evidencing the risk-based thinking. So it's also another topic. And finally, we'll discuss the main challenges according to the inputs you gave me in your emails before this webinar. Okay, so let's start with an example. Okay, now let's bring the topic to life with a real-world example using a simple and relatable scenario. Okay, so imagine you're working with a small or medium-sized manufacturing company. So a typical case in many industries. So they rely on a few key suppliers to deliver critical components just in time. Now, and this is something that I will repeat in this webinar several times. Start with an objective, an intended result. So the manufacturing company wants to deliver on time. So, okay, the team determines a clear risk, supplier delays. So this could be due to transport issues, capacity limits, or even geopolitical events. And in a lean operation, even a short delay can stop production. Okay, so determined risk. Now, we assess the risk. The impact is high. A delay could stop production, delay deliveries to customers. And that hurts reputation. But the likelihood is medium, okay? So it doesn't happen often, but it's not impossible either. So, but because of that, the company decides to act. Okay, so then comes, we need to mitigate this risk. So they decide to qualify a secondary supplier. That way, if the primary one fails to deliver, they have a fallback ready. This reduces the risk without significantly increasing operational complexity. And finally, the risk doesn't just go into a drawer, it's tracked every month during procurement meetings, okay? So the team reviews supplier performance and readiness of the backup supplier. This ensures the mitigation remains effective over time. This example shows how risk-based thinking can be simple, pragmatic, and integrated into daily management practices, even in a small company. Okay. Now, we have this example. Well, let's go to the risk definition. So when discussing risks and opportunities, we should remember and explicitly mention expected results again. Okay. So ISO 9000 2015 defines risk as the effect of uncertainty. Uncertainty is simply something we are uncertain about. There is doubt and we are unsure. We can control that. Then, in the note of the definition states that an effect deviates from the expected, positive or negative. So, due to uncertainty, there might be a positive or negative deviation from the expected or intended result. I mean, by the way, I prefer ISO 31000 2018 definition of risk. The risk for them is the effect of uncertainty on, again, objectives. Okay, we have a plan and then reality sets in. Now, I leave here the link for the first article of this webinar. So, how to address risks and opportunities in ISO 9001 2015. Okay. Now, let's see now the process related with risk-based thinking. So, risk-based thinking should be ongoing. It can't be done once a year and considered adequate. I will come back to this topic later. Okay. So the best way to apply is through the PDCA cycle, which the standard recommends. So first, you should define the scope of risk-based thinking. Since this standard focuses on customer satisfaction and delivering a quality product or service, you must include all the processes and issues affecting those two. And don't forget that ISO 9001 mentions the ability of the QMS to achieve its intended results. So we are still in the plan phase, and the next step is to select the appropriate methodology. Okay, there are a lot of available methodologies. I will speak about specific methodologies later. And there is no single methodology that will fit all organizations. Okay, so my advice is to do a little research and select methodology according to the criteria that you find appropriate. So in this cycle, we start with determining the risks. Okay, the next step is, of course, to conduct the risk evaluation. So the best way is to include relevant people from your organization and get the most relevant information and data needed for the evaluation. So risk evaluation is best done as a team effort, not a one-person exercise. Once you determine an acceptable risk, and remember, there is no universal objective way of evaluating risks and their tolerance. Okay, so it is up to each management team to decide what is intolerable risk. You must create, based on this decision, what is tolerable, what you can accept, what you cannot accept. You must create a plan to mitigate those risks. And this can be done in the same way you performed preventive actions. Okay. In the end, you need to do a follow-up to determine whether the actions for risk mitigation were effective and if the risk assessment methodology or scope should be altered, should be changed. So if there is a need for further action, you need to initiate corrective actions. Now, don't forget, consider the non-conformities, complaints, devolutions, and lost customers as signs and warnings about the need to update the risk assessment or the risk evaluation. So, are they signaling that changes must be made? One last remark, don't worry too much about not being exhaustive enough in determining risks and opportunities, okay, on the first attempt. Look into this picture, okay? It's in an iterative cycle. So determined by calendar, so like, for example, performance evaluation, or by event, so imagine receiving a complaint, okay? These are ways we can go and update this, the risk assessment. So a simple way of evaluating risks may be Well, something like this kind of matrix, where we assess risks based on two dimensions: the probability of the event occurring, that can be low, medium, high, and the consequence or impact if it does occur, low, medium, high. Now, the color coding helps us visualize the priority. So green means acceptable risk, so we can just monitor. Yellow, moderate risk. We need to consider if action or some kind of control, extra control needs to be applied. And orange, high risk, action required. So this matrix helps us make priorities, okay, to mitigate or eliminate significant risks before they impact our processes or outcomes. Now, let's see the opportunities. A simple way of evaluating opportunities may be something like this, where we evaluate the return or potential benefit of the opportunity, low, medium, high, and the effort or resources needed to pursue it, low, medium, high. Again, the color coding supports decision making. Green means quick wins, act fast. Yellow, well, means worth exploring, analyze further. And orange, high effort, only pursue if strategic. And these help us, again, focus not just on reducing threats, but also on capturing opportunities that can improve quality, performance, or customer satisfaction. Now, one thing here, can you see the difference between risks and opportunities? So with risks, something bad may happen if you don't do nothing, okay? With opportunities, if you do something, you will make some effort, and it's not sure that that something good will happen, okay? It's not sure that something good will happen. We need to do some kind of effort, okay? Now, I leave here links for 4 articles, okay? Diagram of 4 steps in ISO 9001 risk management. The other one is how to identify risk significance in ISO 9001. How to identify risk controls in ISO 9001. And the other one, risk-based thinking, replacing preventive action in ISO 9001-2015. Okay. Now we have here a question from Javier. Risk management program in ISO 9001 have the same rules like ISO 17025? And Cecilia asked, is this methodology applicable to ISO 17025? Well, the answer is, so ISO 17025 also requires risk-based thinking, but because it applies to laboratories, it has more explicit expectations around risks to impartiality, validity of results, and competence. So both standards incorporate risk-based thinking, but ISO 17025 deals deeper into laboratory-specific risks, okay? So while 9001 leaves more flexibility for organizations to design their own approach. I leave here a link to an article called How to Manage Risks in Laboratories according to ISO 17025, okay? Now, let's continue. Okay, so let's see where risk is mentioned in ISO 9001. So ISO 9001 mentions risks and opportunities in several clauses. So this one, 5.1.1d, states that top management should promote the risk-based thinking approach, okay? Clause 6.1 mentions risks and opportunities about the intended results of the overall QMS or undesirable undesirable or desirable consequences, considering context and interested parties. So again, remember this classification of expected or desirable or undesired are categories attributed by interested parties with a stake in the game, like top management, like regulators, like customers. Now, Clause 5.1.2b, okay, about customer focus, mentions risks and opportunities about products and services. So what can go wrong with specifications or product use? or service, okay? For example, are there any opportunities to improve product or service performance? Now, we have clause 4.4.1F, so about processes, mentions risks and opportunities in processes. So the QMS is a set of interrelated processes. Each process has intended results. The process exists to fulfill a purpose, and can have undesirable consequences. Things can go wrong. So these three basic areas, okay? Now, let's see. Clause 9.1.3e, so about monitoring, is about evaluating the effectiveness of actions to act on risks and opportunities, okay? Now, about the inputs to the management review, this clause 9.3.2e mentions the effectiveness of actions to deal with risks and opportunities to be evaluated at management reviews. And finally, clause 10.2.1e says that whenever a nonconformity occurs, we should consider the validity of the present risk assessment. So, are there new risks, or we need to reevaluate the probability or severity or gravity? So, let's see. We have risks and context at organizational level. So, seeing organization as a whole. Risks and products and services, and risks and processes. Okay, so we speak here of risk, but in reality is risks and opportunities. So I leave here the link for two articles. Does ISO 9001 require a procedure for addressing risks and opportunities? And a free white paper, Basics of ISO 9001 Risk Management. Okay. Now, let's see examples of risks related with context, risks, and interested parties. So, about the context. Clause 6.1 of ISO 9001 asks us to determine risks and opportunities by understanding our organization's context, internal and external issues. So, and what relevant interested parties expect from us. So we need to consider clause 4.1, the context, and 4.2, the relevant interested parties. But instead of jumping into a random brainstorming, okay, we're going to anchor our thinking in the purpose, okay? We start with the intended results, okay? So let's begin with the outcome we want. So in this case, we want to comply with product compliance obligations. This sets the direction for our risk thinking. We're not just listing problems. We're asking, what could affect our ability to meet these outcomes, these important outcomes? Now, let's determine issues that can help or hinder achieving this intended result. So then we look at relevant internal and external issues. So for example, this one, internally, lack of adequate resources for compliance. That's a weakness, okay? And we look externally and we think, okay, there's an emerging stringent product regulations globally. Oh, that's a threat. It's something outside our organization. So, and we capture those internal and external issues into a SWOT structure. Okay. So now what we can do after putting all the issues, internal and external, in the SWOT, okay, SWOT matrix. Now we can play with combinations of strengths and opportunities, and strengths and threats, and with combinations of weaknesses and opportunities, and combinations of weaknesses and threats. And with those combinations, we can determine organizational risks and opportunities. Okay, so the step 3 is combine SWOT elements to determine risks and opportunities. So now we look at what happens when threats and weaknesses, okay, combine. This specific combo points to a real risk. So we have this risk of non-compliance with product regulations. And we ask, is that risk significant? Will the regulatory body or a customer consider it critical? Oh, likely yes. So it's important. Okay, let's evaluate it, and we evaluate and we determine that this is very important. So we flag it as okay, as important, considering the present situation of the organization. Now, it's important, so we need to act. Okay, now we need to step 4, determine actions and their intended effect. So this is where we move from determination to response. So for these risks, we might increase training, reinforce quality assurance headcount, or invest in a regulatory surveillance tool. Okay, so we determine actions and then we evaluate effectiveness. This is step 5, evaluate effectiveness. How do we know if those actions worked? So we evaluate the effectiveness by looking at how we having fewer audit non-conformities related with compliance obligations, or are we faster? Do we have now faster regulatory response times? Did we improve compliance metrics like timely submissions, or what is the feedback from external audits or notified bodies? And we should also review whether the risk level has decreased in our risk register. And that is something that sometimes we need to we forget to do. So key takeaways from this. Again, first, always start with the intended result. What are we trying to achieve? That's our anchor. Okay, so in our example, it was comply with product compliance obligations. This gives us a purpose-driven lens for determining risks. Second, don't begin with free-form brainstorming. Instead, use structure. Organize your thinking using a SWOT framework: internal strengths and weaknesses, external opportunities and threats, always in the context of the intended result. Third, use combinations of issues to determine meaningful risks and opportunities. For instance, a weakness like under-resourced compliance combined with a threat like tighter global regulations helps reveal a real risk: non-compliance with product laws. And fourth, prioritize. Ask, is this risk relevant, significant? Would our customers or regulators care? So if the answer is yes, then it deserves attention, then it deserves evaluation. And finally, taking action is only part of the job, okay? We must also evaluate effectiveness. That means asking, did the risk level go down? Are the outcomes improving? Are compliance targets being met? That's how we close the loop, okay? Now, we have here a question from Francisco. Francisco sent this question before this webinar. And when I saw this question, I said, wow, great question to help me stressing that start with outcomes, not with lists. So Francisco asked, is there a way to determine when a proposal from the SWOT may or may not be risen as an improvement action? I ask this because I've seen topics like the manager doesn't take into account my opinion, or the air conditioning is too hot or too cold, or I need a new computer because mine is too slow. And Francisco ends with, sometimes it looks like a Santa Claus list of wishes. And that's great. That's really true when we don't start with outcomes, okay? Our goal is not to win the championship for the most extensive list of risks and opportunities, but to build the most relevant to our organization and the results we want to achieve. So we need to focus on the intended results of the QMS, or things that we want to avoid, okay? That kind of attraction, and instead of having a free brainstorming session, okay? Now, let's see about the opportunities. An example from the context with opportunities. So opportunities are positive deviations from expected results. For example, demographic evolution aligns with a rise in chronic diseases. Also, more and more people are used to working and interacting with online screens. And this can be seen as external issues an organization can exploit. So working together with expertise in medicine and brand notoriety, an organization can work to serve more customers without investing in facilities through telemedicine. Or in a world with more uncertainty with demand, okay, where customers delay decisions until the last moment, an organization can use spare capacity or partner with others to offer a more flexible service with a reduced time to serve. Now, by the way, okay, we use the word opportunities. It's the same word, but it's very different, okay? To distinguish opportunities arising, okay, from the context analysis, potential events or trends that the organization cannot control. So the organization, your organization, cannot control demographic evolution, okay? There are opportunities that you cannot control, with opportunities arising from clause 6.1, serve more customers through telemedicine. This second kind of opportunities will only manifest if the company makes some effort, okay? So what could be the return? What could the return be? Making the effort, what could be the return? Okay. Now, Sashila asked, how will risk management enhanced features in ISO 9001-2026 version? Okay, so I use this question from Sashila just to warn you, to tell you that next October 2nd of October, we will have a webinar dedicated to the differences between ISO and these versions, ISO 9001, 2015, and these ISO DIS 2025. Okay, about clause 6.41, the DIS introduces a more explicit expectations for systematic risk evaluation, not just determination. So now it's mandatory. This uses verbs not used by ISO, like analyze and evaluate risk. And by split, and also there's an interesting change is when you look into clause 6.1, you see 6.1.1, okay, about this, the context and the interested parties and determining risks. And then you have 6.1.2 about actions to address risks and opportunities. Now, what happens is that 6.1.2 in the DIS version is just actions to address risks, okay? And then a third point is created, 6.1.3, actions to address opportunities. So I think that this version wants to elevate opportunities to the same level of importance as risks. Okay, so yeah, but October 2nd we will have that webinar. Okay, now let's see opportunities and risks related with services or associated with services. So customers' complaints and evolutions are essential signs of risks with your products and services. So, for example, your quality control activities can detect non-conformities, and this is somehow the manifestation of one or more risks that your organization should consider and care about. So, risks about products and services. Lost customers are another sign of risks with the products and services that should be considered. And whatever your organization can do to improve its competitive advantages is a potential source of opportunities that can be used. Okay, so for example, an IT service provider offers cloud storage solutions to businesses of different sizes. Okay, let's see the relevance. Ensuring consistent data retrieval speeds is critical for customer satisfaction and competitiveness in the cloud storage market. Now, assume an expected result. Always start at the end. Okay, what we want this expected result. High data retrieval speed within specification limits. And okay, and related with this, we can consider a risk. Okay, use of different data centers makes data retrieval speed variability much wider. And we can also consider an opportunity here. Okay, so we can separate high-speed data retrieval services and sell them at a premium price for performance-sensitive clients. You see, that's why, in a certain way, a risk or opportunity it's not intrinsically positive or negative, or not. No, this effect of the uncertainty, okay, is not intrinsically positive or negative. That depends on the way we look at things. Okay, it's like that old saying that when the crisis happen, okay, someone cries and someone sells handkerchiefs. Okay, so it depends also on this. So risk and opportunity. Now your organization should evaluate risks and opportunities and decide whether to act and what to do. And remember, okay, the risk-based thinking is never about reacting, but about preparing for the future. Yeah, that non-conformity happened, but you cannot do nothing about that. Okay, doing something about that is clause 8.7, okay, or 10.2. That will depend on the cases. But acting about the future, about reducing the probability of that from happening, that is okay. That is risk management. Okay, that is like the old preventive actions. Now let's see. About processes. Okay, processes. So when determining risks and opportunities around processes, I'm always trying new methods that can be seen as more natural and effective by organizations. So I can use a brainstorming session, okay, with that condition about the intended results. I can use a flow chart, and I'm a big fan of flow charts. And I can use techniques like the tools like the failure mode and effect analysis, hazard analysis and critical control points, or fault tree analysis. So yeah, these are tools that we can use. So, and we ask, what can go wrong or be improved? And by the way, I'll leave here a link for an article called "What is Failure Mode and Effect Analysis and How to Apply It in IATF 16949. We have here a question, two questions. One question is from Patricio. Patricio asked, what is the most acceptable or widely used risk assessment matrix, which is user-friendly? Well, in ISO 9001, there is no prescribed risk assessment tool. The standard leaves it very flexible. So the most widely used and user-friendly approach is this kind of approach, or probability or an impact risk matrix, often with 3x3 or 5x5. Okay, that's I think it's the most common. Okay, this creates a kind of a simple heat map, green, yellow, red, that allows risks to be ranked and actions prioritized. Okay, so it is popular because it's easy to understand, quick to apply across different processes, and sufficient to meet ISO 9001 clause 6.1. Okay, other methods like failure mode, effect analysis, or others are also acceptable, but are more detailed and usually applied in specific industries like automotive, pharma, food. Okay, and Adelaide asked, any risk assessment method specific to process management? Yes, so the most common is failure mode and effect analysis, or also process hazard analysis. Both assess risks directly within processes by determining potential failures, their causes, and their impact. Then there's a prioritization of the corrective actions. Adelaide, in healthcare, you can have healthcare failure mode and effect analysis, root cause analysis, clinical risk assessment tools are widely used. Okay, they adapt the process-based risk assessment to things like patient safety, medical procedures, and clinical workflows, ensuring risks are managed where they directly affect outcomes. Okay, but in both cases, the principle is the same. Embed risk assessment into the process map, so risks are determined, evaluated, and controlled at each process step. Okay, so let's now move into a short example to apply what we've learned so far. So imagine a common process, handling support tickets. The intended result here is to resolve all tickets within 24 hours. That's our performance goal. Now, what can go wrong? Well, we might suddenly get a surge in customer tickets, maybe due to a product defect or a marketing campaign, and response time suffers. Another risk is losing experienced staff. New team members might take longer, or there could be gaps in knowledge. On the positive side, we might automate responses to frequent issues using a chatbot. That's an opportunity to improve efficiency. And by analyzing ticket content, so by analyzing trends, we might spot trends that help our product team prevent future issues altogether, turning feedback into improvement. Now, using flowcharting, okay? So a handy tool is the flowchart when assessing risks and opportunities among processes. So drawing a flowchart makes it much easier to visualize the flow of activities and what can happen, okay? And if you work with services, the flowchart is even more useful because it makes visible something that is normally is more abstract, okay? So first, consider the purpose of the process, what and the expected result, and then ask what can go wrong or be improved. So in this example, our manufacturing order process starts when the production manager gives a production order to a production operator. The production operator starts production and records information in the production order. Then the production operator packages the parts and delivers them to the warehouse. Very simple, very basic. Then, okay, ask that team that knows the process, that works in the process, what can go wrong? Think about it and write your answers in sticky notes, that fantastic tool. What can go wrong with our intended results? Or what undesirable results can come out of this process? So, for example, you may think of unavailability of raw materials, no worker to operate a machine, power failure, machine breakdown, lousy quality raw materials, or wrong machine settings, produced defective parts, insufficient productivity level, wrong package. Okay, now evaluate what is critical and define how to avoid or minimize those possible risks. So you can think of start or improve preventive maintenance and introduce a Kanban system for critical raw materials. Decide to have a formal approval of the first good part. Develop a formal quality control plan. Develop a formal process control plan. And start performing a formal package control and develop packaging work instructions. Okay, so in your management meetings, keep your risk radar alert. Remember that performance indicators, complaints, and suggestions can be used to update the risk register and improve action plans to reduce, avoid, or control risks. That is how to develop, so in a certain way, that is how the best way to develop a quality plan for a process from the ground up. You start with the risks, okay? Now, Selina asked, how is ISO 9001 risk management different from a typical internal risk assessment used for an annual plan and a risk and control matrix? Well, ISO 9001 asks, what risks and opportunities affect our processes and objectives, while an internal risk matrix, often audit finance driven, asks questions more like what risks exist, what controls mitigate them, and how do we test those controls, okay? That's why I prefer, with ISO 9001, I try to remove the use of the word identify risks, okay? Because identify means that you are not, your mind is not active. Oh, you see, oh, that's a risk, and you identify the risk. But the language of ISO is determine risks, is you are an active decision maker. You look into something and say, this is a risk. No, this is not a risk. I don't care. Or yes, this is a risk, okay? Because if it is identify, you don't have any chance. It's a risk, period, okay? Now, let's move to this example about using one important thing that I like to is using the purpose, okay, of a process to determine risks and opportunities. So looking into the purpose or the expected results of a process is an excellent start to determine risks and opportunities. So consider this example. The process purchase resources in the QMS of a manufacturing company. What are the expected results that we want from this process? Well, we want resources are to be obtained at the optimum price within the required quality levels and are received when needed. And we also want purchase are to be authorized and within prescribed budgets. Okay, right. Now we can look at this and start thinking, okay, if this is the purpose of the process, what can go wrong? What are the risks? What can prevent the process from meeting the expected results? Okay, and you start thinking, overpaying for items purchased because you saw optimum price, poor quality in late deliveries because you saw required quality levels and are received when needed, or vendors selected inappropriately, okay, so are not authorized, buying more than it is needed, okay, and unqualified or illegal vendors are used. So related with the second paragraph. And now think about the opportunities, okay. Think about, okay, we can develop strategic partnerships with key suppliers, okay, to minimize, to improve performance, or we can implement an automated procurement system, or we can collaborate with suppliers on continual quality improvement initiatives. So messages, don't forget to look into the purpose of a process. And just looking, you don't need to see the flow chart, just looking, you can list potential risks and opportunities, okay? Now, one last topic is documenting and evidencing the risk-based thinking. So what does the standard require? Well, the standard doesn't require you to document the risk-based thinking, so it is entirely up to you. However, applying risk-based thinking will depend on your chosen technique, okay? So in the case of a small organization, so you'll probably demonstrate it to the auditor during the interview when she asks about risks in your industry and the organization and how you deal with them. In the case of a bigger and more complex company, you'll probably choose some more complex technique, which will require a procedure to explain how you apply it along with the necessary records. Acquiring evidence of a risk-based thinking approach is more a headache to auditors than the company itself, okay? Now, look into the picture, okay? Now, let's just keep the yellows, okay? So, preventive maintenance, the Kanban system, the approval of first pass, the quality and process control plans, the package control, and the packaging work instructions are all evidence of applying the risk-based thinking, okay? Think about that. All evidence of that. So SA asked, what are some of the templates that we can use for risk management? Well, you can use 𝗲𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗀 ISO 9001 documentation toolkit, okay, where you can see examples for a risk register, examples of a procedure. You can use it right away, okay? Del-Rey asked, what comprises an efficient, simple criteria for keeping a record of risk opportunity to use as supporting evidence of compliance to ISO 9001? Well, you can use an efficient record should show, okay, that determine risk opportunity, its impact, the action decided, the responsible person, and the follow-up or the result, okay? This is enough to demonstrate compliance with ISO 9001-2015. Yori asked, I'm interested in seeing suggestions on what is the best way to show risk-based thinking has been used. So the best way to show risk-based thinking in ISO 9001 is through evidence in process planning and decision-making. So documented risks and opportunities in the risk register or matrix, links between risks and objectives, controls built into procedures, and records of actions taken. So like meeting minutes, kappa, audits. What matters is demonstrating that risks and opportunities were determined, evaluated, and acted upon. Not so much the format, okay? And now, Beryl asked, can we use the same risk register for enterprise risk management and ISO 9001 risks? Yes. So a single risk register can be used, provided it clearly distinguishes between enterprise level risks and ISO 9001 process or quality risks. So we don't want auditors snooping into information outside the scope of the QMS, okay? So be careful with that. And Yen asked, okay, I received this question before the webinar. Yen asked, how does one identify quality-related risks, and when does one identify quality-related risks? So, and my initial answer was quality-related risks are determined by analyzing each process for what could prevent it from delivering conforming products or services or satisfying customers. They are typically determined during process planning, changes, reviews of non-conformities, customer feedback, and management reviews. In ISO 9001, this is an ongoing activity, not a one-time exercise. And after writing this, I start thinking, oh, and I'm a very visual person. Thinking, let me think about a visual answer to this. And I got this, okay? So imagine an athletics track as a representation of a QMS evolution in time, okay? There is the one-time implementation phase, this part here, where we do the initial risk assessment about context, processes, products, and services, okay? And that is translated into things like what we saw, okay? Procedures, forms, SOPs, rules, new equipment, new tools, yeah, okay, and the risk register. And then comes the maintenance and improvement phase. So during the maintenance and improvement phase, we have the daily operations, and this sequence means, okay, the time evolution or the flow of time. And during daily operations, we may have to update the risk assessment. Why? Because of non-conformities, complaints, delays, breakdowns, so events, okay, like meteors, okay? And during the maintenance and the improvement phase, we have the monthly reviews. So during monthly reviews, we may have to update the risk assessment because of, trends, KPI performance, and other things. And during the maintenance and improvement phase, we may have, for example, quarterly management reviews. And during the quarterly management reviews, we may have to update the risk assessment because of trends, KPI performance, objectives, and other things. So, and I would say that updating the tools normally is no problem. Based on this, because of this, we update procedures, we update training, we update equipment, we update decision rules. I think that the main problem is keeping the risk register updated. Okay, so when you don't use specific software for that, it's not so. Of course, we can do that, but it's not. We tend to forget. Okay. Now, again, as usual, I'm late, so let's see. Main challenges with risk management based in your emails. So it's okay. Selecting and applying practical risk assessment tools. Okay. Aligning ISO 9001 with other standards like 27001, 45001. And how to create this shared responsibility and awareness of risk, and the one that is documenting and communicating risk effectively. Okay. So I have here two questions that I can answer here. So Joe asked, comments on the FAIR, Factor Analysis of Information Risk method. Okay, FAIR was developed for information risk or cybersecurity context. It is used mainly alongside ISO 27001 or NIST, not ISO 9001. So using FAIR with 9001 is a kind of a overkill, okay, unless the company's core business involves information security or if management explicitly wants to monetize risk decisions. Okay, and Patricia asked, how the AI is impacting the implementation of risk management and ISO 9001 in general. Well, is accelerating risk management by enabling faster data analysis, predictive insights, real-time monitoring. It helps organizations identify patterns, anticipate failures, and support decision-making, making risk management more proactive and evidence-based. However, don't forget, AI does not replace the need for human judgment and process discipline required by ISO 9001. Again, we don't identify, we determine, okay? There's a mind there in doing that. So, to conclude, risk-based thinking is continuous and ensures greater knowledge and preparedness, okay? And for that purpose, you can use �11's ISO 9001 Premium Documentation Toolkit. So here's the link with details about the toolkit. And I'll also send you now the meeting link to schedule a call with our toolkit expert. He'll explain you how toolkit works and show you any document you'd like to see, okay? So here's the toolkit expert meeting link. And okay, just before starting the Q&A, some of you requested some tips about how to implement the QMS. We in 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀 develop a course for all those that want to implement a management system for their organization or as external consultants. The video lectures are free. Perhaps they could help. Okay, we have this link here for the lead implementer, 9001 lead implementer course, and the ISO 9001 foundations course. So the detailed course on the standard. Now, before we begin with the Q&A, just to mention that if you can also ask me anything about ISO 9001 directly. Just send me an email and I'll answer as quick as I can. And if you have to leave before this Q&A session is over, please do fill in the short survey that will open right after you leave the webinar. Okay, let's see. So, Keshia asked, can this be applied to ISO 13485? Yes, it can be applied to ISO 13485. Again, so I would say that I would expect more demanding techniques, okay, to qualify the risks or to evaluate the risks, okay. About ISO 14971, okay, here, I confess I don't know that standard, so I cannot answer you, okay. Sorry. Mohammed asked, may you please explain more the philosophy and principle of risk-based thinking? Okay, this question was in the beginning of this webinar. I hope, Mohammed, that now you have a more better idea. If not, please ask again or ask a particular question regarding some topic that you would like to know more about, okay? So Sheila, kindly elaborate about the example to explain lost customers. Okay, so a lost customer is something that happened that we don't want that to happen, or normally we don't want that to happen, and so we can see that, we can use that as an as a signal that something is not okay with our company. Okay, so it's a risk if we are losing customers, if we are losing good customers. So we need to see that as a risk, an important risk, and so we need to go and see what do we need to change in our organization to minimize the probability that in the future lose customers like this. And this is something that happens a lot in organizations. So it's written in a lot of books. You know that those organizations that are so focused in winning new customers that they don't care so much about their current customers, and so they are winning. It's like a bucket with water coming on top, and there's a hole, and the water is coming from the bottom. And so it's like they are so focused on more water, more customers, and customers that are working with the company say, "Oh, they don't care about me." That's okay. Yeah. That's it. Another question is from Jen. For an airport, which risk assessment methodology would you recommend is adopted? Oh, I cannot recommend you because I don't have enough experience with airports, besides being someone that uses the air companies. But I believe that you should use some. There must be some kind of more elaborate techniques. Okay. I know that for example, when you work with pharma industry or we work with the chemical industry, you have very specific methodologies for example, for like explosions and things like that. Okay, that can then certain kind of atmospheres in the facility. So I think that there may be something, the same topic, the same kind, not so much with health and safety, but regarding quality and the level of service for airports. So machine breakdown, no SOP, need to have contingency plans to address. So if your organization determines that risk, and evaluates that risk as relevant, yeah, then you need to do something. Okay, but it's your organization that decides that classifies that as relevant. Okay, and you see, I see organizations that don't have any SOP regarding maintenance, and actually they don't need, because it's something basic. Okay, but others, they're very detailed because it's a costly issue, and it's something that can hurt their reputation. So we need to do that evaluation. Q-Ram asked, is it possible to perform a risk management for 2 or more standards simultaneously, ISO 9001 and ISO 27001? Okay, so I would prefer to do things separately. Okay, we can use the same register, but with a column there to identify the relevant standard, but we can use the same register, risk register, but I would like to do in different moments. Okay, to think about the focus, or because it's a different focus. You need people perhaps with different expertise. I think it's better to separate. Okay, for example, with 9001 and 14001, it's what I do. Okay, question from Denise. If someone already has QMS, PRPs, and the HSCCP for their ISO 22000 accreditation, will they need something different or additional if they wanted to seek accreditation of 9001? Yeah, you need something more. You need things related with the business processes, things related to the context, for example. Okay, things related with the context that are not so specific about the product and operational process. But you think about if you think about, for example, things like Sashila asked before about lost customers. Okay, or things like there's a trend to imagine that you have a product, your product has high levels of salt, okay, or high levels of sugar, and there's more and more legislation coming out, okay, from the United States saying you cannot heat that, you must reduce the level of sugar, you must reduce the level of salt. Okay, that is something that is related with the context, that is something that can lead to risks and opportunities, okay, related with the context. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, so Grace asked, how can you align risk management ISO 9001 with ISO 27001? So you determine the risks, then you evaluate the risks, and then what you need to do is, okay, so I'm thinking in terms of someone, a person, for example, working in the procurement area. Okay, so I would say there will be a procedure, for example, about what are the good practices for doing the job in the procurement department. Okay, and so I would have a procedure regarding with the topics about quality, things like supplier qualification, supplier selection, supplier evaluation, placing the order, the follow-up of the order. And okay, there's for ISO 27001, I could think about things like when we think about qualifying a supplier, we also need to include there things that are related with cybersecurity, with intellectual property protection, things like. And so we collect those risks and what we need. So relevant risks, we collect what are the activities or the actions that we need to minimize the impact of those risks, and we integrate that in our procedure. Okay, that's how I would do it. Okay, so I would like to avoid something that I saw in the past in some companies, some big companies, is that they have, this is true, they have a procedure that is, I believe it was white. Okay, let it put the sheet of paper was white, so it's quality. The one that is green was the environmental procedure, and the yellow is the health and safety procedure. No, people are not always changing their hats. People are doing their job, and while doing their job, they have to have these three types of considerations or these types of concerns. And so, while doing our job, we have these concerns regarding risk, quality risks, regarding information security risks. Okay. Now, Grace asked, let me see, if in the scope there are multiple companies under the same group that deal with different services, health service, IT service, and business operations service, should each entity have different risk register, or could it all be recorded under one risk register? No, you can do it. It's up to you. Okay, it's really up to you, because there is no the ISO 9001 doesn't say nothing about that, so it's up to you. But my opinion is I would separate that. Okay, I would separate by business operations service. Okay, I would, or sorry, by different by different company. Okay, because for example, be relevant in terms of training. So focus what relevant training is needed to minimize risks and opportunities. So different people, different concerns. So I would think about in that way. I would act that way. Okay. So Anna asks, do we have to make a risk analysis to all non-conformities or improvements? No. It's like that. It's that trend analysis. Okay, it's that trend analysis. So if you, remember when this risk started with ISO 9001 in 2015. There was some ISO document saying that this risk-based thinking replaces preventive actions. And if we go back to ISO 9000, the 2008 version, when they spoke about preventive actions, was very related with clause 8.4, analysis of data. So it's not so much one specific. So we may have a specific non-conformity that is so relevant, that is so severe that we want to act right away as an improvement to avoid this in the future. But normally what we do is more like when we analyze a period of time and we see the trends and we see, okay, we need to do something because this can is happening from time more frequently, the probability is high. So yeah, more like that. So think about analysis of data, think analysis of trends. It's more like that. So Mo asked, oh, a very, yeah. How would you deal with the uncommitted top management for effective risk management implementation? Well, what I would do would be something like showing what can happen to others. Okay, showing what can happen when with others in terms of risks that were not considered, and because of those risks, those companies had big problems, big consequences. So that's a way of trying to, let's say, motivate top management with the wallet. Okay, so this is relevant. This is important because it can minimize, it can avoid, it can reduce the probability of these bad consequences for the company from happening. Okay, so perhaps in that situations, the best approach will not be to try to present all the risks, but those risks that are more relevant, that are more painful. Okay, yeah, that's one big thing, is show the pain or the potential pain, and show the benefit or the potential benefit. Okay, something like that. So I remember, for example, a company that was not providing the best training for new employees, and because of that, in the production lines with more where the rate of new employees was higher, they had more quality problems, and we translate that into money, and based on that, okay, we could have some kind of, let's say, but the military word is bridgehead or head bridge, okay, something like that. We in their mind, so we can see this take there, saying, okay, this is relevant, this is important. Now let's see some more minutes. So okay, so Mohammed, yeah, I was asking about the philosophy beyond risk-based thinking and the principle that this kind of thinking built on. Yeah, it's a kind of looking into the future. So we look into what is the purpose, what we want from this process, what we want from this set of activities, what we want from this event. Okay, so we start at the end, and then we think. We want to avoid problems. Okay, we want to avoid problems, and so we start thinking, okay, what can go wrong? Okay, what can go wrong? And that's a kind of a speculation, because never happened. Okay, or for example, never happened. Okay, but this can happen in the future. Okay, so it's the same as so here I'm in Europe. So in Europe we are starting the autumn. Some more days and we'll be in autumn. And in the morning we can leave the house and it's sunny, and then after lunch will be raining. And see, perhaps it's better. So okay, so I want to avoid being stuck waiting rain to stop. So I will bring my umbrella. Okay, so this kind of thinking is what is with the risk-based thinking, based on the risk-based thinking. What more? Oh, Mudasir asked for road project, which type of ISO recommended? Sorry, it's something, I don't know. I cannot help you. Okay. In the past, I worked with companies in that area. I would remember, now I don't remember some European standards, but now I don't know if they are still updated. No, I cannot help you. So what more? I have here questions from, let's see, 5 more minutes. Jean-Pierre asked, can we use 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀, the knowledge-based application, to prepare our risk-based thinking approach for ISO 9001 implementation? Well, 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶 as a set of scenarios, okay? You can try and see, based on your company, if the scenarios are applied to your company. That made sense. But at least is a starting point, okay? Can be a starting point, okay? Because some risks are almost common to any organization. So you can, as a starting point at least, okay? I remember once I saw, yeah, the answer regarding something that was about a marina, and the answers was fantastic. That was about, well, more about ISO 14001, but were the good answers. Okay. Oh. Okay. So yeah. So I still have one question from Savils. How would you suggest integrating the SWOT and risk matrix? SWOT and risk matrix. Okay, so it was something that I mentioned here. Okay, so I use the SWOT to determine to park my external and internal issues, and then I combine relevant external and internal issues, and from there I develop risk and opportunities. That's how I do it. Okay. Okay. So Sashila wrote here a document, a list of a text where she says, "I'm responding to 𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗏 related to ISO 14971. Yes, risk assessment template can be applied." Okay, thank you, Sashila. Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, all right. Yeah. So let me see here. Okay, so I have some questions that were sent before the webinar. I will send by email the answers. Okay, I will answer just one because I prepared an article. So Numa asked how to use ISO 31000 for evaluating risk in context to ISO 9001, and so please look into this link. Similarities and differences in risk management in ISO 9001, ISO 31000, and ISO 27001. Okay. So for all the other, I have here questions from Stella, Eleonora, or okay, yeah, I will answer with an email. Okay. So, all right. So our time is up. I'm sorry there was no time to answer all of your questions, but the purpose of this webinar was to give you a general overview of the risk-based thinking, not to go into a detailed discussion about risk assessment. Okay. So as you can ask me anything about ISO 9001 directly by email. You can also download this presentation deck from our website or take a look at video tutorials and documentation templates. We'll send you the email with all the necessary links. Finally, if you join this webinar through Zoom, you'll see a short survey, so I would kindly ask you to spend a minute to fill it in. The recording of this presentation will be available in a few hours. You will receive a link to the recording. And if you join the webinar through LinkedIn and YouTube, you will receive a link to the short survey now, and the link to the presentation will be posted on our event page in a few minutes. That will be all. Thank you for your participation, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Have a nice day.